Hello, very good evening. In today's lecture, we will be continuing from the last class where we did form validation. Today, we will be doing a simple example of form validation. How do we validate a simple data that has been entered in any form? For example, name, father name, surname, and email address. My name is Dr. Ishan Birdi. If you are for the first time, don't forget to subscribe this channel and hit that bell icon so you receive the notifications regularly. Let's begin. Now, this is a simple form that I've already created, a form validation. It contains 4 text fields and a submit button, which basically is used for submitting the form data. Now, typically this data would be sent to the server or in a database, but before we do that, we need to validate that this data is accurately entered or not. In order to do that, basically we will be going back into our source code. For example, here's my source code. And in this case, this is a simple HTML that I've already created for you. I will be, and it just doesn't contain much data. Simple HTML head tags and a form tag is available. Within the form tag, the action is currently specified as hash. You can specify any particular page for that matter. For example, test.php. If that page is to be loaded, and the method is supposed to be, for example, get a post. Depends up to you, whatever you want to use it. Because this is not our major concern. The concern is that whatever data we have entered inside our HTML input forms is actually entered accurately or not. Okay, so that's what we need to basically validate. So in this case, basically we said input field, okay, text ID is name, the name std name. The placeholder has been specified so that the hint is given. And the table close. Then we have created a paragraph tag with paragraph ID E, and similarly this paragraph is available for everything. This paragraph is by default not visible, but this will be visible if this text field is used blank. So we will use this paragraph tag for our error message. Okay. So now let's just come back into I think this should do the trick, form table body. Okay. So once we are aware here, after the table, let's just come and add our script tag. Okay, script, and there we go. Okay, so within script, let's, I think in fact brum 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 brum. Okay, and let's just bring it a little bit upwards, and I may increase the font size so it's more readable now. Okay, so the paragraph, basically placeholders are there, the text field is there. I don't know why this guy is giving me this error. I should not have that error. Backslash td is missing. It's just already there. Backslash td, backslash tr. This is just going crazy. I don't know. I guess I might have missed a particular field somewhere. That's why this is red. It should not be red. Anyway, so let's just begin. So we have a script tag. Within the script tag, now basically what we need to do is we need to create, for example, a function. Okay, so this will be the function that will be called when the user submits or clicks on a button. So as soon as I click on a button, I need to call this JavaScript function to first validate the form data before submitting it to my server. So here, for example, validate is the function name. Validate. Okay, so we create our own custom function. This function will verify whether this data that you have entered is entered correctly or not. Within this, I will create a variable called name is equal to, and I will read document dot get element by ID, and for my name I have ID called name. Okay, so I will just say that read the data called name dot value. Oops, sorry, just value. Okay, semicolon. So this basically means that go inside my document, which is HTML document, get element by ID name, get an element that has an ID called name dot value, whatever value has been written inside that text field, return that value for me, and then save that value in a variable name. Okay, simple as that. Similarly, we will do the two other things. So variable again, for example, father name is equal to document dot get element by ID bracket start bracket close, and for father name I use f name as in my ID. So here again I will use my father name dot value. Okay, semicolon, and just remove this. Similarly, let's just hit a Control C, Control V here. Okay, this will basically become my surname, I guess. SURNAME surname document, and I think that I remember surname. SURNAME surname. Okay, so now read the data from surname, and finally same thing as email. Okay, email get element by ID, and I think if I remember correctly, I just named this ID as mail. Okay, so mail is here. So we read all the four data that we entered on our variables. Okay, then within this function, now basically we do name checking. Validate name field. Okay, so now first thing we validate the name field. So we say if the name that you entered is equals to blank. So first thing we check is that is the name that you entered blank. If it is blank, show me the message. As simple as that. Okay, so in this case, block start, block close. In fact, I will start the block in a new line. So what we do is we go inside the document dot get element by ID, and the ID is supposed to be, for example, I just written e dot inner HTML is equals to please enter name. Okay, semicolon, and I think that should do the trick. Maximum thing I can do is um, let's just leave it here. Control S. Okay, and as soon as I check it, I come back here, and for example, I don't enter any name. I click on submit. Okay, nothing happens. Okay, that's because we go on click, and on click we have not specified the validate function. So we say validate, here we go, semicolon. Okay, so on click, when your user clicks on the submit button, on click we will perform the validate function. Control S. Now we go back here, and I think just hit a refresh, and without entering the data, like click on validate, and it just gives me enter name and then takes me to the next page. Okay dokie. That's because okay, we are running submit button. Maybe we can do is, okay, that's because we submit. So what we do is I just come back into the test PHP and just load a hash here. So by action, hash means load my own page. So now if I come back here, go back inside my page and enter, see this, enter name data, and it's going blank. So we need to correct this small problem. In order to do that, what we do is we use on click and we called an event, event event. Okay, now this is basically a default event variable which is triggered whenever we click on this button, and we pass that event to our method called validate, and within our validate function we say event. Okay, so now basically it means that once a JavaScript, or once you click on a button, we execute the JavaScript code. Once the JavaScript code is executed, it will call the validate function, but it will also pass an argument called event. This is a built-in variable that will hold which event triggered this particular event. Okay, so what was the reason that this was triggered? In this case, it was submit button. So we are basically passing the submit information, submit the form information to our JavaScript, because we are validating the data. So before this data is sent to the server, here what is happening is that it's sending to server, and the reply is coming back from server as a blank file. Okay, the same file is being reloaded. If I don't use hash here, okay, a form action, if I specify test.php, now what is happening, if I come back here, submit, new page is displaying, there is no test page. So it's validating the data, but it is taking the result over. So we need to stop that. So we need to say that if there is an error, form is not filled, do not send the data to server. So in order to do that, first we capture the event, we pass the event inside the validate, then within the validate event, we again use the same function, because this function validate requires an event. Okay, so we give it an argument. This is the declaration, this is the calling. So in declaration we specified a variable name called event. In our calling we pass the event. Okay, these are built-in things. And then here event dot, there is a method called pre prevent default, yes, and bracket start, bracket close, semicolon. What this will do, it will prevent the default operation of the submit button. Okay, later on we will work on that. So let me just test this first, and I hope that I've got this right. I go back and click on submit, and there we go. Okay, now it is not switching to the test page. It is showing me please enter the name error here. Why it is doing it? That's because we captured the event which was triggered, which was on click. We passed the event to the JavaScript function, and once JavaScript function received that event, we told it to do nothing. Okay, by default the function is that once ever a form is submitted, all the data is form is sent to a particular PHP or particular file. It can be same file or it can be a different file. If I use a hash, the same file is reloaded, hence that error message is gone now. Okay, so in order to ensure that that error message is remaining, we need to prevent the form to submit to the server. Okay, because the form is not to be submit. So in this case, we have not entered the data, so we need to stop that form. We need to stop the form from performing its default function. So that is why we are calling this event, and we have a method called prevent default, which will basically hold the default function of our form. I hope you understand that. So now if I don't enter anything, I get a message and the form is not submitted to the server as well. So let's come back here. So this is basically anything. Now what if I enter 1, 2, 3 and click on submit? See, the form is submitted. However, I had only entered 1 or 2. So I need to now validate and check for more things. So let's come into form validation, and now I say OR function, again OR operator, to pipe signs. So if the name is entered, if the name is entered, this becomes false. Or now we need to check the name is equals to null. Sometimes this also we do, which will validate that it's not empty or null. Okay. Then now we need to specify regular expressions. So these two are basically used to validate and check that it's not empty and it's not null. There is some data here. Now the third regular expressions that we need to specify. So we go inside the brackets, we ensure the not null sign, and then we specify bracket sign. Here I specify A to Z in capital. So we ensure that the name has to be a letter, either in capital letters. At least one time it has to be entered. Bracket start A to Z, small letters. It can be at least one time. This should also be specified. Okay. Then we use the test function that we discussed in previous class. Test name. Name is the string value, is equals to false. Okay. So this basically now means that we have evaluated a complete expression. Let me decrease the font so it's on at least on the one line. Okay, so hopefully you can read it now. So now basically it means that use this expression and then test it, that is this expression exist in this thing or not. Now we press S, equals to false. So if this returns false, it will work fine. So for example, if I enter 12, click submit, please enter your name. I entered, for example, Zishan, submit, it still gives me an error. So for example, if I enter my surname, press enter, it still gives me an error. Why is that? For example, if I give my full name, okay, and space BHADDI, I submit, it still gives me error. That's because if I come back into my code, remember I've written A to Z as well, 1 A to Z. So my condition states that I need to have at least one capital and small letters. So I come back here and I give capital ZEESHAN, click on submit, I go back into my new page. Go back, I give my BHADDI, click on submit, I come back into my new page. I give a number, click on submit, I come into my new page. So now it all becomes a string. So it basically means that now it satisfies the content area. Anything between capital A to capital Z is basically allowed. So now my validation is working. What we did here is we created not null, empty string, null string, and an expression, regular expression string. Okay, and then this expression needs to be tested. So this method basically means this expression dot test name. Now, the better way would have been that I can come here and I can create a variable patron is equals to, and this patron entirely I could have control X and pasted here and then given a semicolon, and then here I would have used a patron dot test name. So this basically means this is my patron. This patron needs to be verified and tested here. If the result is false, that means that this is okay. Okay, so test name a condition, if result is equals to false, this now will be evaluated. So condition is, I save it, come back here again, 1 2, please enter your name. I enter the small letters, submit, please enter your name. I need to ensure that I have one capital and one small letter. Now I come back into my test page. Got it? Very simple as that. So this is what we do when we need to validate the form data. In this case, I have prevented this thing. I will come into else as well. So for example, if the data is true, now what we do is we come inside the else, block start, block close, and here we need to specify document dot get element by ID, and I will again use the same EID and dot inner HTML is equals to question mark semicolon. Okay, so this can be anything else. So if this is the case, do not print anything here. Okay, so if this all becomes true or any one of them becomes true, you basically give an error. If none of them is true, basically you just go back here, or you just give a message there. Okay, so this is just validating the name field. Let me just copy this pattern, control X. In fact, I pasted above the program. Okay, so now what we do is once this validation is done, this basically checks for my name field. So I can copy this, control C, and in fact let me just control C this. I come back here, control V, and this time my father name field. Okay, so father name field. So in this case, now I will just use F name, father name for father name, and father name. I think that should do the trick. Get element by ID, and for father name we had used E1, right? So I just come back here for father name and I will use E1 and E1, and the event is same thing, father name, please enter FATHER father name. So let's just validate the father name. So once I come back here, I enter my name here, this is okay, submit, see this, please enter the father name. Now there is no message here, only father name is missing. So if I come back here, FATHER, okay, let's just correct that. So now same validation and same pattern is followed for father name as well. So for father name also, I used a not null, a blank, a not null, and a pattern. And the pattern basically we use to evaluate this particular based on this pattern. So it must have A to Z, it must have small a to Z and capital A to Z. At least one capital and one small letter. If you don't want this compulsion, you can remove the one here. This will basically mean A to Z and A to Z. Again, you can write your own expressions as you require and as you like. Okay. So now, for example, if I come back here, surname. So let's just copy this, Control C, Control V, and father name. I will have now surname. Okay. The same thing, father name. Instead of F, I will write surname, and instead of SUR surname. What's happening? I think it's just 2 times, and this also would be SUR. Okay, and get element by ID, I think this is 2 now, this is also 2, please enter your SUR surname. Okay, same concept now goes for the surname. Continue, yes. So I need to specify name, Shanwardi, and for example academy, and I hit the submit. My page is basically working fine for me. Okay, so now no longer error. So if I remove this, hit a submit, please enter name. If I enter a number, again this name. So now my validation is done properly. Finally, email. Let's jump into the email account. So I come back inside my code. Again, let's just copy this, Control V, and this will become my email field. Surname, I think this is my email. Instead of surname, let's just use email, and the same thing. Okay, obviously email validation is little bit now tricky. you need to add few more things within our email pattern that would be validated. Okay. I think let me just correct this. E2, I think this is E3 first and E3. So here basically let's just copy this pattern for now. Control C and email. Let me just paste this pattern, email. Okay. So within our email now basically we need to specify a few different things. For example, let's just create a new pattern for our sake. Okay. Um, in this case, we had used this. In fact, let me do one thing. Control C, and let's just copy this pattern here. So now what we do is we give a double backslash, come back here. In this case, we said that not must be a dash z. We can specify a dash z as well. So now it basically means that it should have a small letter and capital letter. So this is another way of expressing or specifying a regular expressions. Okay, so it's not necessary that you use only this way. Okay, separate az, separate az. We specified separate az because we had to ensure that we need at least one capital letter. Okay, we can specify that in combined form as well. Okay, and then we specify brackets, so minimum 5 to 10 characters. At the rate is again an essential thing within email, so we specified here. After at the rate we need A to Z in small letters. Usually after at the rate all the domain names Gmail, hotmail.com are in small letters, so we need to specify that as well. And we specify the length of it, for example 5 to 7 should do the trick. Dot bracket start bracket close A dot Z. So after dot again we need A to Z, sorry, this one, bracket start bracket close. Okay, so even after the dot operator we need A to Z, and then after this A to Z length can be 2 to 3 characters. Okay, so .com, .au, .pk, whatever basically you want to specify as your email address. Make it close. So now this becomes my expression for email address. It must contain A to Z. It must have at the rate, again A to Z, and then dot, and then again A to Z of the character lengths. So this becomes our expression that will now be evaluated for our email address. Okay. E3 is basically again the same pattern. Document dot get element by ID, read E3 element, which is basically inside my form. So mail has an E3 paragraph inside it. So we read it to present our message. Please enter email address correctly. Okay. Control self, event prevent default, so that if this error occurs, do not submit the PHP form. Prevent the default function of your submit button. Okay. So we did that. And if this condition becomes false, else don't display any message right now. Okay, and that should do the trick. Control S, and let's just come back into our code, and we have name, we have father name, we have, for example, our academy, I guess, surname, and submit. Please enter the email address. So here again I write only this thing, enter, please enter the email address. I write at the rate Gmail, submit, please enter the email address. .com, submit, please work now. Why not? 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 Gmail, it should work, it should work, it should work, it should work. Expression A to Z, 5 to 10 at the rate. Okay. The pattern is pattern, same thing. So I haven't changed the variable name. So again, I need to make sure this is pattern email. So now this pattern is validated, because previously it was comparing with this old pattern which required us to have one capital letter at least. Okay, and not at the rate anything. So now pattern email. Okay, so I changed this variable. Pattern email test is the basic method, built-in method that will test this email address based on our pattern that we specified here. If this is false, this variable will return a true value and it will give us this message. Control S. Let's just come back here, give a value again, and at this time Zishan, submit, enter the email address correctly. So I entered it with respect to gmail.com and click submit. My form is submitted. Okay, so if I come back here, if all data is correct, the form is submitted. If I even miss out the .com, hit submit, it will, oops, sorry, it should give me an error. Continue. Let's just come back here. Okay, this form is submitted. Okay, so now if I, for example, forget this at the rate sign, hit submit, it gives me a message back. Okay, thus we go. So it will validate the email address based on a pattern that we provide here. This should do the job. Okay, so this is simple validation that we do within our HTML and JavaScript. I hope you understand it, and we will discuss more in next classes. Thank you very much for watching.